Okay, so this is my diary for being a targeted individual. It's a long story, and I've only been aware of it for a few years. It's a destabilization program. There's a lot of scary espionage words. It's designed to make me sound crazy. So, where are my notes? Okay, there we go. So, schizophrenia, all right, it's a split from reality, all right, and it's a spectrum of disorders. A split from reality is just, what reality? You would ask that. What reality? What reality do we live in right now? There's people who live in a conservative reality, and there's people who live in a liberal subculture. But it all has one reality, doesn't it? It's not like it's a counterculture. It's something else. It's a completely different thing. But yeah, it only needs to be fantastical to be considered a break from reality. But religions are generally exempt from that. It just doesn't make sense. All right. Doesn't apply to me. Then you have psychotic symptoms. All right. And I've been off the phone with therapists recently, and they all just seem pushy, and they're all just racketeers. It's their business. All right. I don't fit any of these schizophrenia symptoms, and yet I'm still pushed on their drugs, and I lose my my Second Amendment. I lose my my credibility. So you have psychotic symptoms, So it's described as behaviors and mental states associated with breaks from reality, and it impairs the ability to function. I'm expecting that to look like someone hiding from aliens, someone from eating dirt in order to ward off demons or something like that. I mean, you could even say that's just your average ritual, but that's a little different, you know. Then you have disorganized thinking and speech, rambling and fragments, people changing their train of thought to another. But honestly, doesn't that just sound like a casual conversation? If people are just talking for the sake of talking, one subject turns into another subject into another subject. And then an opportunist psychiatrist can just get their hands on that and then, bill person for therapy time, bill a person for medication. It's abusive. Breakdown in selective attention, the ability to focus on one thing while filtering out another. Again, I can only see that being a problem if you're at work. Like think of a dog in cartoons, how they just randomly chase after squirrels. You can't be chasing after squirrels if you're, behind a cash register or anything else like that. Even then, it's probably easy to hide. But yeah, that's like a very, very, that's a very, you'd have to be a huge problem to be considering psychiatric care. You have word salad. There's fragments of words. How could you describe it? Pizza taco, alphabet, NASA, Oregon, Mexican Revolution, South Park, BMX bike. Like, is that a word salad? You know, is talking in tongues word salad? Then you have delusions of false beliefs, not based in reality. You know, grandeur. I'm the Queen of England. I'm a 5-time champion of rally car racing. You know, no, I'm not. I'm not that. That's not who I am. Some people, I've never heard of that. Heard of one girl in middle school who said she was pregnant to get attention. What else? Yeah. And then, you know, I'm sure there's just abusive narcissists who go about attacking people all the time. You know, someone who's practicing or training, they go out and say, "You're not a professional. Who do you think you are?" You know, they just say that to people just learning. All right, you got narratives of persecution and paranoia, you know, and this is interesting because if you have a narrative of persecution, you know, if you think that people are out to get you, people are controlling you, you know, no one's really, you haven't looked into the dark triad then, and then you don't really live in reality. Like, work is scarce. There is, you know, people want money. And if you live in a place like Los Angeles, which is kind of you know, infamous for that kind of behavior, to spy on, you know, chicanery. It's a word. Like, there is persecution, there is chicanery, there are these things. People lie. I don't understand how people can go about saying no one lies and you're crazy. I mean, does it take really hard evidence? I mean, if you're infested with parasites, then yeah, that's some paranoia. If there's an implant in your arm, yeah, if you just got out of prison, maybe you have an implant in your arm, but you know, most people don't have chunks of metal in them that weren't put in there by a doctor. You know, you have voyeurs out there. You have agent provocateurs. Just recently in San Diego, they found out that all the protesters urging the state to open up were all hired protesters. You know, you have the what surveillance capitalism. You know, people just making, you know, bum fights, all that stuff. That's all just turning into some sort of red room entertainment of voyeurism. You know, a reality TV show, just an insane amount of psychopathic control. But yeah, there's chicanery, there's voyeurs, there's agent provocateurs, incitement agents. If you're just trying to be smart and say it's a lingerie store, because it's not, you know. Agent provocateur applied to a woman in lingerie is a woman trying to cry rape. They're trying to get touched from wearing lingerie in public and then cry rape. They're trying to implement men into sexual assault. Then you have Scientology with their fair game, all right, which I'll get into later because that's one of my main suspects. You know, they have their fair game policy, they're shunning. All right, perpetual disturbances and hallucinations. Yeah, abusive voices are common. That's a common thing. But it's interesting. And this is where all of this just loses credibility with me. Coming up to the end, which really just makes no sense whatsoever. All right. Americans talk loud. You could probably, your neighbor's casual conversation probably blends in with the ambient sounds outside. And it's probably really annoying, and you don't even know it. And guess what? Africa, all the hallucinations and voices, they're apparently super kind. Apparently they have, they're constantly mothered, as a feminist would say. That's just how people talk, and you have to look into it too. That's how an average comedy movie. That's how your average comedy movie speaks to each other, And then you have bullying, because the heart of it, no one should ever really talk to you like that. It's not bullying; it's the douchebag paradox. They call you a bitch. They really mean it, but they can say they're joking, so they're not brought to some sort of justice or anything, or told to stop because it's effective. If you're constantly called a bitch, you're going to accept it, and then you're going to, take on that role. Your average music, just violent language, it's pretty awful. And yeah, it's just easy to do and it's easy to get away with, but you have your freedom of speech people say they can say whatever they want. They want to be, it's really weird, but it destabilizes people. It's for a personal gain. People work hourly. They'll go ahead and they'll convince someone they're crazy just to go ahead and punch in the hours they put in for that work. Do you know how many nurses there are? Do you know how easy it is to get certified as a psychiatric nurse? You don't even need training. All right, then you got disorganized, abnormal, incongruent behavior and emotions. I've never done any of this. Laughing during a funeral. Okay, again, the average media promotes this kind of behavior. It's quirky to be laughing at a funeral, to be goofy one moment and agitated the next. Maybe not so the compulsive movements like rocking and motionless for hours. If you go ahead and do that, then, that seems like it's a problem, but that's easy. You can act that way. People can just act that way. All right. Okay, there's positive, negative, and disorganized symptoms. That, I don't have anything to say about that. Then you have the physiological. All right, there are brain abnormalities found. Kind of. There's nothing to agree on. That's just a theory so far. Yeah, there's, I don't see how a brain scan doesn't find anything. If there's a tumor in your brain, I think that's the constant thing that they say, that doctors say, is that, oh, you are only hearing voices because there's a tumor in your brain. Not just because your hypothalamus or your frontal lobe is buffer than the rest of your brain. That doesn't prove anything. All right. Diathesis stress model. All right. So there's a biological and genetic vulnerability. So no one in my family has ever had schizophrenia. At least that nothing's been found, but that's the one part of the model. Diathesis. Then you have environmental stressors, which is interesting because most people in the city have schizophrenia. People in rural areas do not have schizophrenia. I believe that has something to do with just how close people have to live together. The stress of just always being around people, behavior sync. It makes sense, but I don't think they have it right. We're not on a playground anymore. There's no yard duty to stop people. All right, and then this moves on to dissociated identity disorder, which is completely acted and fake. The story of Sybil is a really good example of that. And what the doctor did is a really good example of that. Yes, Cornelia B. Wilbur. She's just a total charlatan. That's her interpretation of psychology. She coerced her into treatment just to write some some interesting story about her multiple characters. She just sounds like an actor making an acting reel. If you take it out of a camera, it's not crazy. And people can fake their mental disorders, and then other people can fake it for you too. There's the Church of Scientology was found doing that with fair game. I grew up in Hemet, in San Jacinto. My parents took a tour of that place, and I'm pretty sure my father mocked him, being who he is. So, being their headquarters center, the Pentagon of Scientology, I don't think they would take too kindly to having non-believers around. That's how that religions, in sociology, that's what religions do. They depend on their numbers. They depend on people living together, voting the same way in order for superiority to be the dominant culture. They need that. They can't have non-believers walking around. Victims of the Stasi, they went through the same thing. My grandparents came from the Baltics. They had to go to Germany, and eventually to the United States to avoid all that. People know how to do this now very easily. It's I'm not crazy. I'm a victim. You have your hedgehogs who would take advantage of this strategy. Your anarcho capitalists, they'll get all over this. They don't care. They'll buy the police. They'll pay for all this. Millionaires, or not millionaires, the 1% have more money than they know what to do with. Some of them may be crazy and they just want society to be a certain way. You have your massively powerful and influential cults around. You have your Islamists, your jihadists, your Salafists, your Mormons, your Jehovah's Witnesses, Haredim, Scientology, the Amish. I grew up around all that. Suddenly my sister's a Muslim and I'm not allowed to watch my nephew as a teenager. Really makes you think why people do these things. You have your cousins around you come from Mexico, turn out to be racist pigs because your dad's white. All of a sudden, you're a garbage disposal. And that's just playing. It's just a vicious society we live in, and they want to make it worse. They can't just send me to prison, but, they'll find a way for me to find justice. Just recently, someone was called crazy on TV just for not being a Muslim. How far is that from coming to the United States? You have people in Washington State trying to go ahead and make it legal for Christians to kill atheists. My cousins, or my uncles, they're all in prison for like serious crimes, for fucking drug trafficking internationally, weapons selling. I'm a little goody goody, so they may just need to get rid of me. Yeah, dude, they're really vexatious. They don't care about me. They're all surrounded around, they're pedophiles and perverts too. The reason why only my sister is doing well. The only reason why my nephew is doing well, because he's a Muslim. Even in this country, they consider Muslims better people than atheists. That's America for you. The Mamba mentality, it's it's crazy, and I just found out about Mormons. All right, it's an interesting thing. So I didn't really care who I hung out with. I just stuck with my middle school friends, and it's really interesting what they did, because they do these things. So I had my token white friend who gave me my white nationalist identity. So that's the only reason he became my friend. And then, he stopped being my friend because it wasn't working. All right. All of them, they're all really well versed in this. And then I have my Seventh-day Adventist friend. They're just trying to seek numbers. All right. And yeah, that's the only reason they just tried to reel me in. And then you can move on to the Mormon friend who tried to make his his wealth. They didn't really proselytize, but they invited. All of them are just into drugs too. I mean, who cares really? It's not like it's like there's total moderation in that. We know what they do to you, and you just need to not harm yourself. Mormons even have a prescribed amphetamine. So I mean, it's silly, and it sounds like a joke religion, a parody religion, to be honest. Yeah, Mormons, they're interesting though. Apparently, they have wards, and they have a ward map you can get after you donate. After your tithing, you get your own social security number, your own membership number. Guess that has to do with their new Jerusalem or whatever they're trying to do. I can't believe they're allowed to do this, because it's pretty out there. It seems like the amount of government control there is. It's pretty fucking scary if you have a free association like that having, trying to get the same control that the government has. Yeah, so they have wards. So I'm guessing if you're in their territory, this is where the face comes on. They're always concerned about your employment, how your well-being is. All that becomes pretty biased if you're an atheist. You don't pray, you don't participate. Anything remotely that they do, I could see they would feel threatened in their numbers if you went ahead and, moved into their neighborhood, into their ward, and didn't practice with them. Which is interesting, because only 30% of Americans even attend a church regularly. So it just seems weird that they do that at all. Charity is an awful, awful way of helping. They have a choice whether to be charitable or not. That's the whole point of it. You can either pocket it or you can give it away. It's silly, man. It should not be that way. What else? All right, let me check out my Wikipedia links. All right, so you have movies who clearly display all this all the time. You have Unsane that came out recently. A woman was trying to get help. She thought she needed help, and then she ended up getting committed into a hospital. The staff start. Well, it's a fiction movie, and it's an over exaggeration, obviously, but the point is there. They found recently a hospital in Colorado was found of racketeering. They were found of extorting their patients, forcing them to stay extended stays when there was nothing wrong with them. Yeah, so Unsane, you have Gaslight. It's a really old movie. Domestic abuse, you have, that people don't believe in. Can you believe that? So it's domestic abuse, but it's not domestic abuse because you're allowed to abuse women. You're allowed to go ahead and tell them the lights are off when they're on. You're allowed to tell them you left the oven on when you didn't. That's a form of, correcting behavior or something. Very this dark triad psychology. You have Free Wilsiak from South Park, and McCullough is interesting because in the Wikipedia it says that the actor who played one of the two SeaWorld or Free World or whatever employees who were the announcers for the sea show, they said that the voice actor, he's likely to do something like that. He would go ahead and he would convince a bunch of people they were hearing that like their pet was a god or something. He would go ahead and make people think they were hearing things. You have Cabin in the Woods, that amount of voyeurism and control. It's interesting because they're all wearing Mormon t-shirts. All right. What else is there? All right. People have a right to privacy. There's a right to privacy in the world, at least in the United States. But you have surveillance capitalism. You just have normal surveillance that people take advantage of. They go ahead and, just abuse of power. You have voyeurism. Then there's things like the Institute. All right, there's a film called The Institute, which follows the Jejune Institute in San Francisco. They go ahead and it sounds fun. It sounds fun at first, but apparently it goes into insane amounts of control, and they murder people apparently, and they gang stalk. It's a bunch of hippies from, not even hippies. I don't even know what to call that. Is that progressive? It sounds like progressive because they're just doing things for the sake of it being new. Yeah, so they go ahead and they make it so, these installations, these scavenger hunts, but then they go ahead and they interfere with people's lives who aren't related to it whatsoever, and they create nuisances. I feel like that's just a loophole for destabilizing people. Because some people think art is more important than business. We'll all eat pastels. I don't know. Yeah, so McCullough, he's probably someone to take part of this. You know, then you have Shannon Lariat. All right. So this is how liberal, how loony things can get. This guy's a body modifier, which is fine. All right, cool. Just I have a tattoo, it's whatever. But apparently his teachers praised him for doing something unspeakable to his class, and he got A's and a degree in it for just doing unspeakable things. I think he slipped them some LSD or something. I'm not exactly sure what he did or what's his story, but it just goes on to this insane amount of liberalism that's allowed. I'm saying allowed, but is just even considered, like, people appreciate it. Like, they patronize that idea. Thankfully, things like bum fights, those things are fine in California. Other states too, but those things are super illegal now. Because I just hate reality television with a passion. I said hate, but I don't like it. I don't like reality television. It's annoying. It's awful. I miss my History Channel. You know, are those jobs history now? Because I think they are. There's only about 500 dredgers in the United States in total. So I kind of think it is history because those are shrinking jobs. And the interesting with Scientology, all right, they have their fair game policy. And being as what I think Scientology is, it's basically, so the guy, he basically just went to the whole self-help section and then condensed it into one thing. And then put in a bunch of, and then I don't know if a bunch of people just got a hold of it and then made it super predatory. Like, there's just a huge chance of just to take advantage of people, but there's just sounds like a lot of predatory and just abusive things you can do to people once they're in it. And then, so yeah, so their fair game policy, it sounds like fair chase. In hunting, there's fair chase. So there's rules on how to kill someone or how they go about it. And then you have, the most dangerous game. And being he's a literary person, and being how fantastical the wealthy can be and how dangerous those people can be, they just want to go ahead and hunt the poor. They just want to hunt the poor for fun. Yeah, that's how you eventually take care of the world's problems, right? Isn't that what they say in how there's going to be an end to all that? And people gamble on that kind of stuff too. There's human baiting. I mean, cage fighting, that's all blood sport, right? It's all consensual, right? But that's blood sport. They just have the rat race kind of thing. They're just gambling to see how much of how much of the destabilization a person can take before they kill themselves. You can square off money everywhere. You can square off money to living in isolation. You could take a bet for that, give them odds. It just sounds like something we would do. They have a lot of money. They have more money they know what to do with, and then you have some disgusting person who suggests it. I'm not going to say, a hedgehog, basically. You're going to have a hedgehog who's going to suggest they go ahead and they gamble on when someone's going to kill themselves. Apparently the Nazis did this. The gang stalking, they would call it. My psychologist teacher showed us, it's a little fart cannon. I don't know why that I don't know what that has to do with psychology at all. I think it was in a textbook, and then she brought a real one, but it's a fart cannon. So it's just a little parachute, little spring on it, and it just shoots a little puff of air at you from far away. Just imagine a bunch of you know, people who are paid to go run around with them with different smells, and they can just make someone think they're smelling watermelon all the time. Yeah, someone said watermelon before I said it outside. Thank I'm thankful I'm in the United States and I can't be forced medication up until I harm someone. Even then, self-defense is hard to prove now, in California at least. So, you have psyching people out, the Mamba mentality as well. How far would you go? You don't need a test better than the class. You just need to eliminate everyone else. So much money, more than they know what to do with. Public money. Okay, you have Nico Machiavelli as well. I mean, you have Tupac as well, which is an interesting take on that, because what Tupac did, this sounds like a gang lore. Gangs are a lot like cults. They have really crazy points of views, really crazy ideas, and they ball it up into like this weird, crazy belief package that everyone has to take part in. So with Tupac, you have Nico Machiavelli, because he has his album Machiavelli. I don't, he spells it differently. But then he has him depicted as Christ on it, on the cross. And so it doesn't make sense because Christians don't like Machiavelli. He's an awful person. And then, but he says, you go ahead, have to become Vlad the Impaler sometimes. You have to do these things to be a good politician, sure. And, you have all these really weird leadership schools around the city. And they just turn them into these people. And then everyone becomes a victim. And then suddenly you have, people dishing out sluggish schizophrenia diagnoses, and everyone thinks it's real schizophrenia. It's a racket. It's racketeering. Racketeering and rackets don't always just sum up to I'm going to beat you up unless you do this. That's hardly racketeering, but that's the only way you can really prove it. I don't even think they would release that publicly at all. Apparently your balsamic vinegar comes from a cartel. Just everyone thinks it's bizarre and it's weird that the drug cartels, they can't distinguish the difference, and the news story is just really broken, but it's made up into a way that it's useful for them to talk about, whoever regurgitates the news story, that the avocado cartels are different from the drugs. Yeah, so I mean, it's racketeering, at least in my part. They're falsifying all the symptoms of schizophrenia in me in order for me to be stuck in that system. The police do the same thing. They incite crimes. They've arrested me 3 times because they've brainwashed me to a point of agreeing with them. I was part of a protest and I was incited. I was starving and I was incited. They do this for their own gain. It's not the kind of capitalism we live in. People say capitalist society, sure, but there are rules. We don't live in anarchy. It's a confidence trick. It's super old. magic tricks, confidence tricks. It's the same thing. It's silly nonsense, man. It's just they just don't stop. And they're all mentally ill and they're all free. Also, there's a non-lethal weapons program that has in fact done what I'm describing. So in Iraq, they used LRAD and they used an energy weapon. It's a parabolic speaker basically, and it shot sound at religious, zealots or terrorists or something like that. It convinced them they were listening to Allah, and they put their guns down and surrendered, which is cool. That's a great application. That's a good thing. But then apparently your average citizen, your religious zealot could do the same thing. Because honestly, no one really believes that hard. They're just putting up an act for the benefits. They're putting up an act for the tax exemption, for the lack of work they have to do. Yeah, so there's fair game, that exists. It's just not called fair game. It's something else now. It's done by private investigators. Now you're saying you have to be a famous person in order to be, you have to be a really good agitator in order, which I'm going to try to become now, I think. Just become a really good agitator so I can get caught with having a private investigator in my face. And then I can probably sue them and I can probably get my money, that I could have been making, even considering at a minimum wage job in California. Like I'm owed like $700,000 from all the time I could have been working. But I couldn't been because these people are after me all the time. And the police have their agent provocateurs, their incitement agents to go ahead and corrupt me just so that they can have their prison guard hours, so they can hire their cousin. The political abuse of psychiatry has been all over history. They would do it to women. They would do it to. I don't really fully understand communism, how bad it was, how good it was, what they wanted, what they didn't want, but all that matters is that they differed thinking, and we're allowed to do that in the world. People are allowed to agree to disagree. You can have your mutual associations and your disagreements. Those are just tiny details. They have their coping mechanisms. It's a dangerous idea, but there's mobbing. Movie recently George Clooney made, Suburbicon. There was mobbing, but it's a little too in your face because I don't think they would be right at the interracial couples interracial couples door. They went ahead and they that's kind of that happened too. They just didn't, the weird white Protestant family just didn't like they were just racist, racist mob. Yep, just like in Hong Kong, there's agent provocateurs. The G20 protests, they had undercovers. Eric Prince hires ex-spies. Yeah, they hire ex-spies all the time. I live in an area that's surrounded by engineering firms. So there's just a bunch of them. They all just go ahead and they have security clearances. that allow them to do whatever they want. They can act with impunity. There'll be a really nice cover up. But yeah, they're radicals, I guess. I mean, I don't know how radical it is to just show up with signs, but I guess that's radical. All right, yeah, I think that's what I have to talk about today. Of course, I sound like a crazy person, but logic gate. It's something else. Yeah, it's just nonsense out there, and I'm gonna keep updating this, but family does the same thing. They have their criminal thing. I think they're Native American or something. They think they are, and they need me to go and live out in the wild for like, they'll call it the wild, and they'll even complain if you use public services or get a normal job or anything. There's just a disgusting amount of control out there. And yep. Later.